Welcome to the deep dive. We are cracking open the source material you shared with us, getting right to the heart of what you need to know so you feel informed, not overwhelmed.
That's the goal.
And today, we're digging into Raymond Yang's tactical notes on rental housing and asset management. We've got a really specific and honestly pretty unpleasant situation from a listener.
Yeah, this one's tough. So imagine you find an apartment, short-term rental, just for a month. You check it out, looks fine, smells fine. You sign, move in.
Okay.
And the very next morning, bam, this awful smell starts coming from the bathroom. Wasn't there before, but now it's making the place feel kind of unlivable.
Oh, wow. So this listener is dealing with that right now. Started a lease at the beginning of May.
Exactly, a 1-month lease. And, they did the right things. They contacted the landlord straight away.
Good. And the landlord responded.
They did. They tried a few things, gave him an air freshener.
Okay. Step one, mask the smell.
Right. Then they actually installed something called a check valve in the drain, trying to stop sewer gas maybe.
Sounds a bit more serious.
But the smell is still there. It just persists.
So the listener's stuck. What are they asking?
Well, the big questions are, can I get some rent back for this?
Mhm.
A reduction. Has the landlord technically breached the contract because a fix didn't work?
And the really tricky one.
Yeah, the one they specifically mentioned. How do you even prove something like a smell? It's not like you can take a picture of it.
That's such a valid concern. It feels invisible, hard to pin down. But that's where these tactical notes from Raymond Yang might help, right?
Exactly. So our mission here is to unpack this specific case, look at the legal side from your perspective as the tenant, and most importantly, lay out the actual practical steps you can take, like right now.
Okay, let's get into it. Where do we start? What laws are even relevant here?
So we're looking mainly at the Civil Code and the Rental Housing Development and Management Act. Let's call it the Rental Act for short. Potentially the Consumer Protection Act, too.
Consumer protection. For a rental.
Yes, and this is a really key point from the source material, specifically Article 5, Section 1 of the Rental Act. It says something crucial. If your residential lease is for 30 days or more.
Which this 1-month lease probably is.
Right. It likely hits that mark. If it does, the law treats the rental relationship as a consumer relationship under the Consumer Protection Act.
Okay, wait. So the tenant becomes a consumer, and the landlord is like a business, an enterprise operator.
Precisely. That's the terminology.
Yeah.
And that classification is, well, it's kind of a big deal.
Why? What difference does it make?
It significantly raises the standard of responsibility for the landlord. They're providing a service, the housing, and they have a higher duty of care. Plus, and this is really practical, it gives you access to the Consumer Protection Act's specific complaint and mediation processes.
So potentially a faster track to getting someone official involved.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It puts more formal pressure on the landlord than just you complaining directly.
Okay, that's huge if the lease is 30 days or more, but what if it's slightly less, or regardless of that act, what's the baseline?
The baseline, regardless of the CPA, comes from the Civil Code and the Rental Act.
Mm-hmm.
The landlord has a fundamental duty. They must provide the property in a state that's suitable for living in, and they have to maintain it that way for the whole lease term.
Suitable for living in. So a place that constantly smells awful arguably isn't suitable.
You got it. Your obligation to pay rent is directly linked to them providing a usable place. If the smell is bad enough, they might be failing their side of the bargain.
Can a smell legally be considered a defect, even if nothing's visibly broken?
Absolutely. The notes confirm this. A persistent, unpleasant odor can definitely count as a defect or a hindrance. It doesn't have to be a leaky pipe or a broken window.
Interesting.
The source even points to a part of the Civil Code, Article 793, which is usually about neighbors, stopping gas or smoke or smells from next door.
Right, I've heard of that.
Well, the principle applies here, too. It establishes that a severe odor, one that goes beyond what a reasonable person should tolerate, is a legal nuisance, a disturbance.
So even though that law is for neighbors, the idea carries over to a defect within your rental.
Yes, the underlying principle holds. And there are court cases that back this up, situations where things like ongoing sewage smells or even heavy secondhand smoke were ruled as impacting the tenant's right to peacefully enjoy their home, sometimes leading to rent reductions or even damages.
So it's not just about annoyance, it's about impacting your ability to live there normally.
Exactly. The standard is objective. Is the smell bad enough to unreasonably disrupt an average person's life in that home?
Okay, but what about that common issue? What if the smell is coming from, like, the main building pipes, something outside the landlord's direct control within the unit itself?
That's a really common scenario, especially with sewage smells in apartment buildings. It's tricky. The building management might be responsible for those common area pipes.
So the landlord can just say, talk to the building manager.
No, not really. Their contract is with you, the tenant. Their duty is to provide you with a usable apartment. So they need to take action. They need to coordinate with the management committee, push for repairs, figure it out.
Ah, so they can't just pass the buck.
Right. Or they need to take steps inside your unit to block the smell, like they tried with the check valve. Point is, their attempt is noted, but if it didn't solve the problem, their duty isn't fulfilled. The problem persists, so their obligation persists.
Got it. So the landlord has this duty. The smell is likely a defect. What can the tenant actually do? What are the tools Raymond Yang's notes suggest?
Okay, practical steps. First up is the right to demand repair. You need to formally tell the landlord there's a problem and you need to fix it properly.
Formally, meaning not just a text message.
Ideally, something more formal, especially if initial requests haven't worked. And you need to set a reasonable deadline for them to get it fixed effectively.
Reasonable deadline, like a few days, given it's a short lease and already ongoing.
Exactly. Something short, but achievable. And if they don't fix it properly by that deadline,
Then what?
then, under the Rental Act, you might gain the right to arrange the repair yourself and deduct the reasonable cost from the rent. But, importantly, you have to notify the landlord first that you intend to do this.
Okay. Paying for repairs yourself on a 1-month lease might not be ideal, though. Is there a way to just pay less rent because the place isn't fully usable?
Yes, and that's often the most practical route here. The right to rent reduction, Civil Code Article 435. If the defect the odor makes the property less usable, you can ask for a rent reduction.
How much reduction? How do you figure that out for a smell?
It's about proportionality. How much is the usability reduced? If the bathroom is basically off limits because of the smell, or if it seeps into the living area making it really unpleasant, that's a significant loss of value.
So you kind of estimate the impact.
Yeah, the source talks about paying only appropriately reduced rent for the time the defect exists. Maybe half the bathroom is unusable, maybe the whole apartment feels tainted half the time. It's subjective, but needs to be grounded in the real impact on your living situation.
What if it's worse than just unpleasant? Like, if you suspect it's actually unhealthy, sewage gas or something, can you just break the lease?
Yes, that's the right to terminate the lease. There are a couple of scenarios. First, if the defect is serious enough to endanger health or safety, and strong sewage odors could fall into this category. Civil Code Article 424 lets you terminate immediately.
Immediately, even if you technically knew about some issue before.
Yes, health and safety override most other considerations. Even if you knew or waived other rights, if it becomes a health hazard, you can terminate.
Okay. And what if it's not quite a danger, but just makes the place basically unusable for living?
If it renders the property unfit for its purpose, and the landlord hasn't fixed it after you gave them that formal notice and deadline we talked about.
The demand for repair?
Right. If they fail to act effectively on that, the Rental Act, Article 8, allows you to terminate the lease prematurely.
And for a short lease, terminating means what, practically? Getting out and getting money back?
Exactly. It means stopping future rent payments, moving out, and demanding your security deposit back, plus any rent you paid for the period after you terminate and can no longer reasonably use the apartment.
Is there any possibility of getting compensation for, the misery of living with a stench? Like damages?
The right to claim damages does exist. Theoretically, it could cover actual financial losses, maybe if you had to stay in a hotel for a few nights, though that's maybe less likely here, or non-financial harm, often called spiritual distress or pain and suffering.
But that sounds hard to prove, especially the non-financial part for a smell. Back to the listener's original concern.
It absolutely is the main challenge, and that's why the source material hammers this point home. Evidence gathering is everything, especially for intangible things like odors.
Okay, so let's get really practical. How do you document a smell effectively?
Raymond Yang's notes are very clear on this. Number one, and probably most important, keep a detailed daily log, like a smell diary.
A smell diary. Okay. What goes in it?
Date, exact time the smell starts and stops, what it smells like, try to be objective. Sewage, chemical, rotten, moldy. Rate the intensity maybe 1 to 10. Where is it strongest? Does it correlate with anything like the neighbor showering or rain?
Wow, that's detailed.
That detail is what shows persistence, patterns, and the severity. It helps prove it's not just a one-off whiff.
Makes sense. What else besides the log?
Photos and video. Obviously, you can't film the smell itself, But you can film your reaction. You can verbally describe the smell while recording in the affected area.
Mhm.
You can also document any visual clues, damp spots, mold growth near drains, backups, anything that might be related.
Okay, capture the context. Can other people help prove it?
Yes, witness testimony is gold. Get friends, family, maybe even a building maintenance person if they come by, to experience the smell when it's present. Ask them to write down what they smelled, when, where, and how bad it was. Sign statements.
Get corroboration.
Exactly. Neighbors experiencing similar issues, their statements help too. And of course, the building manager, if they're aware.
And all those texts and emails with the landlord.
Save everything. Every email, every text message. If you have phone calls, take notes immediately after date, time, who you spoke to, what was said, what they promised. This creates your timeline. It shows you notified them, shows their attempts, and crucially shows the problem continued after their attempts. It proves their fixes weren't effective.
That paper trail is key. What about more official stuff like air testing?
Professional air quality testing is an option. It could potentially identify specific gases, giving you objective data. The source mentions it. But it acknowledges it can be expensive and take time, which might not be super practical for a one-month lease unless you have serious health concerns.
Right. And if you do have health concerns, headaches, nausea.
Document those symptoms meticulously in your log. And definitely see a doctor. Tell the doctor about the smell in your apartment and ask if there could be a connection. A doctor's note linking your symptoms to the environment could be incredibly powerful evidence. It shifts it towards that health and safety issue we talked about.
Okay, so the foundation is solid evidence. Log, witnesses, communication records, maybe medical notes. You've got all that. What's the sequence of actions Raymond Yang suggests?
All right, the path to resolution. Step 1, if informal requests haven't worked, is that formal written demand. The source specifically recommends using a certified letter in Taiwan. That's Kunzhang Xinhan.
Why specifically that type of letter? What makes it special?
It's a legal instrument.
Yeah.
It provides undeniable official proof from the post office of exactly what you sent, who you sent it to, and when they received it. It signals you're serious, you're documenting formally, and you understand your rights. It often gets a landlord's attention more effectively than regular mail or email.
Okay, so it adds legal weight. What needs to be in that letter?
Be clear and concise. Describe the odor problem. State when it started. Reference your previous communications about it. Mention their attempts that failed. Explain how it's impacting your ability to live there comfortably. Then, make a specific demand. Effective repair within a short, reasonable deadline, like you said, maybe 3-5 days, seems appropriate for this situation.
And mention consequences.
Yes. State that if the problem isn't effectively resolved by the deadline, you intend to seek a rent reduction, and you reserve your right to terminate the lease according to the law. You can even cite the specific articles we discussed, like Civil Code 435 for reduction or Rental Act Article 8.
Got it. Formal demand, clear deadline, consequences stated. What's step 2 if the letter doesn't magically fix it?
Negotiation. Use the letter as leverage. Talk to the landlord again. Maybe now they'll be more willing to discuss a real solution. Propose specifics. Here's the rent reduction I think is fair, or let's agree to end the lease early on this date with my deposit returned.
Try to work it out directly first.
Always worth trying, but if negotiation stalls.
Then what? Mediation.
Exactly. Apply for mediation. It's less formal than court, faster, and aims for a mutually agreed solution with a neutral third party helping. You've got options. There are statutory mediation committees in local districts or townships.
Okay.
Or, if that Consumer Protection Act applies, the 30-plus day lease, you can go through consumer dispute mediation via the local consumer protection officials. The source also mentions checking with nonprofits like the Sue Mama Foundation for potential assistance or advice.
Mediation sounds like a really good fit here, needing a quick resolution.
It often is. It's designed to be more accessible. And don't forget, if the CPA applies, you can also file a formal consumer complaint.
Can you do that at the same time as mediation?
Yes, you can often pursue both. Filing the complaint puts official government pressure on the landlord, which can sometimes encourage them to settle in mediation.
Okay, so multiple avenues potentially. How do you actually claim that rent reduction we talked about? Do you just pay less?
You need to be proactive. First, figure out what reduction you think is fair based on the impact, like we discussed. Is the bathroom half unusable? Is the whole place affected sometimes? Quantify it as best you can. Then, you need to formally claim that reduction. State the amount in your certified letter during negotiations or as part of your mediation request. You need to assert your right to pay that reduced amount.
Got it. You have to
Yeah.
actively claim it. And if nothing works, the smell persists, the deadline passed, mediation fails.
Then you consider exercising that right to terminate. Again, formal notification is best, ideally another certified letter. State clearly that because the defect hasn't been remedied despite notice and opportunity, you are terminating the lease effective date. Specify your move-out date and reiterate your demand for the return of your security deposit and any unused rent paid beyond that termination date.
So that certified letter really is the anchor for all these key steps.
It really is. It provides that crucial dated proof that you follow the proper procedures.
And the absolute last resort is court, litigation.
That's positioned as the final step, yeah. If the landlord refuses to return your deposit or prepaid rent after you terminate, or if you have significant provable damages you want to claim, the source acknowledges it's time-consuming and potentially costly for a short lease.
Might not be worth it just for the principal sometimes.
Possibly, but small claims court might be an option for recovering funds owed. And all that evidence you gathered, that becomes absolutely critical if you do end up in court.
This is incredibly helpful.
Uh,
Okay, let's bring it all together for our listener dealing with this awful smell right now in their short-term place. Based on Raymond Yang's notes, what are the absolute must-do takeaways for them?
Okay, laser focus. 1. Start that detailed evidence log immediately. The smell diary, witness notes as possible. Save every text, every email, document. Don't delay.
Priority 1, proof for the invisible problem.
Exactly. 2. Get that formal certified letter written and sent ASAP. Define the problem, reference history, demand effective repair within a very short window, 3 to 5 days, and state your intention to seek reduction or terminate if they fail. Put them on the clock, formally.
Don't rely on casual requests anymore.
Right. 3. Because it's a short lease, really focus your energy on negotiation, mediation, and, if applicable, the consumer protection complaint process. These are your fastest tracks to a practical resolution. Aim to settle this outside of a lengthy court battle if possible.
Be strategic with limited time.
Precisely. 4. The most realistic goals are probably negotiating a fair rent reduction for the period you've endured the smell, or getting an agreement to terminate the lease early with your deposit and unused rent refunded. Focus on getting out clean or getting compensated fairly for the disruption.
Manage expectations, aim for practical relief.
And finally, remember, the fact that the landlord tried to fix it doesn't get them off the hook if the fix failed. Their fundamental duty is to maintain a usable property. If the smell persists, their duty persists. Their failed attempts actually strengthen your case that the problem is ongoing and unresolved.
That's a crucial point. Their effort matters less than the result.
Wow. Understanding these rights really does shift your perspective as a tenant, doesn't it? You realize you're not powerless, even against something like a persistent bad smell.
It absolutely does. It gives you a framework and tools. And maybe, moving forward, it makes you think a bit more about inspecting not just the visible stuff, but asking about plumbing, ventilation, potential hidden issues.
Well, thank you for walking us through that. To our listener who brought this to us, that sounds like a really difficult situation, but hopefully this deep dive gives you a clear roadmap and the confidence to tackle it head on. Absolutely. We hope these tactical notes provide a solid plan of action for you.
We've been diving deep into Raymond Yang's tactical notes on rental housing and asset management. Hope this gave you some real practical insights.
Stay tuned for our next deep dive. We'll be unpacking a whole new set of sources on a different topic entirely.
And hey, if this was helpful, please do like and subscribe. We'd really love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever dealt with a rental nightmare like this? Got questions? Let us know. Your feedback helps us choose what to deep dive into next.